What happens when we begin to realize that the 200-year experiment we've called the American healthcare system has failed? Tune in to Awakened Wellness with Mylaine Riobe, MD, and join the conversation about how to heal our broken system to reverse our current health crisis. The entire world is looking for answers, and the truth is hidden in plain sight. Learn how spirituality, ancient traditions, and cutting-edge science are merging to create a new paradigm of wellness every Wednesday at 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Time, with live video shows every first and third Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, when you can call in and ask the questions that matter most to you.
And we're live.
Thank you, Rachel. Good afternoon and welcome to Awakened Wellness. I'm your host, Dr. Mylaine Riobe, and we are live here on Dream Vision 7 Radio. Our number to call in is area code 646-558-8656. And go ahead and hit *9 to raise your hand. And as always, I love the amazing questions and comments that come in. So I'm looking forward to what we have in store for today. So our topic for today is stress-proofing techniques or strategies that you should know. And so the reason I call it stress-proofing is not because we're going to eliminate stress entirely, but there is a way that we can dampen its impact on us. There is a way that we can prevent it from damaging us, damaging our physical body, damaging our energetic body. And those are incredibly important strategies for us to learn and employ, especially during this time, or any time really, but in particular now, right? Now is always the most important moment. And so, you know, one of the most confusing things to people is well, what is stress, right? We know the obvious forms of stress, things that make our heart beat, things that make us afraid. Those are obvious stressors. We understand those clearly as things that create stress. We understand financial stress. How am I going to pay my bills this month? We understand that type of stress. But there's a lot of stress that we don't quite know is going on in the background that is just as important, if not more important. And that is more of a subconscious stress. So, when we're thinking about our finances or relationships with people that are not going as we'd like, we can identify those rapidly as stressors because they're in our conscious awareness. The stressors that are most dangerous are the ones we're not aware of, the ones we can't see, the ones we can't feel. I call that stealth or invisible stress, or we could also call it subconscious stress. And those are the things we don't see. Those are the toxins that we don't see in the atmosphere. They're the toxins we don't see in our water, in our soil. They are also past memories that are not in our conscious mind. And so the brain is a phenomenal organ, and it doesn't forget anything, despite what we think, right? We think, oh, I can't remember what I had for breakfast. I have a bad memory. It's not that you have a bad memory per se. It's that you can't bring that memory to your conscious awareness. But in fact, the brain doesn't actually forget anything. It stores it all away, whether we know it or not. What we have difficulty with is bringing it back into our awareness. So when we want to remember a phone number, it's not that we forgot the phone number. The phone number is stored in the brain. We just can't bring it back into our conscious awareness to remember what it is. But the brain has it stored within itself. The brain stores everything. And we're beginning to understand that with studies that even after an event has passed, we call this, trauma, and that's a big, topic of conversation now is, trauma and how the brain remembers all traumas. And it keeps looping those memories subconsciously over and over again in the depths of our minds. That's invisible, unknown, unseen stress. And that stress is perhaps more dangerous than the stress we can obviously feel and the stress we can obviously see. Because when we can see it and we can sense it, we can do something about it. When we don't know it's happening, when we can't sense it per se, and we don't know it's happening, then it's harder for us to actually do anything about it. And so when we really want to, stress-proof ourselves or build our stress resilience, we have to start to bring the unconscious, subconscious things more to our consciousness. And it's not so that we can psychoanalyze them or ruminate about them. It's so that they can be released, let go. And if they're buried and unaddressed, you can't bring them to the surface, right? It's like a pimple that needs to be brought to the surface. If those toxins stay buried under your skin, you're going to remain toxic. But if the pimple comes to a head and it releases the toxins, then you let go of those toxins. It's no different inside of the body, and we're coming to the understanding that memory is actually stored everywhere in the body and not just in the brain. It's beginning to be understood that your cells have memory and retain memory because we're beginning to understand that water itself stores memory. And because 99% of the molecules in the human body are water molecules, it stands to reason that memory is stored wherever there is water. And so when we want to stress-proof ourselves, we have to come to the understanding that a lot of my stress is not known to me. A lot of things I don't quite know are happening. They're happening in the background, right? And so these are where techniques that kind of drill down into the subconscious mind are so important. So we talk about things like breathing techniques, meditation, and even prayer. These things kind of drill down into the subconscious level of the body, and they can bring things to the surface, if you will, to be released. I think, is that a question? Yes. Comment, thanks for that breathing technique you shared a while back. I shared it with my meditation group, actually added it to the meditation prep. Namaste. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Yes, I had the privilege and honor of doing 2 speaking engagements this weekend at a local church. And I had given a previous talk and we went over the HeartMath breathing technique at that previous talk several months ago, almost a year ago. And one of the gentlemen had come to hear me speak again. And after my talk, he came up to me. He's like, I used your technique. I had to have this test and I was so nervous. And it wasn't my technique, obviously, but he said, yeah, I used that technique you taught us. And he says, it made a huge difference. He's like, I was actually able to be calm while doing the test. And so he was really grateful for that. And he's practicing that breathing technique. So it is extremely powerful. Nature is very simple. We're the ones that complicate things, right? Because of our brain. Our brain wants to make everything complicated and an intellectual engagement. But really, everything is simple. We just have to go back to the simplicity of nature. Nature looks complicated on the surface, but underneath, it's very simple. It's the same pattern repeating itself in infinite ways, but it's the same pattern. And so there are basic things that we have to do as human beings living in nature. We are creations of nature and we are nature itself. And so in order for us to be, quote unquote, stress-proof, we have to integrate back into nature. If we continue to extract ourselves out of nature and try and separate ourselves from nature, we will get sick. That's clear. So we have to reintegrate ourselves into the environment that we were created into in order to relieve, that pressure and to release the stress and to be more in alignment. I think there was another question. No. Okay, no questions yet. So yes, absolutely. That breathing technique, it's 3 minutes long, but it's a game changer. Just like Einstein's little equation, right? E equals mc squared. It was a game changer. And so everything is really in its most basic terms, very simple. It's just when we start looking at the surface appearance of things, they look complicated, right? But when we go down to the roots, they're simple. And so when we want to stress proof, the very first thing we have to do is to address our breathing always. And of course we have to get a medical evaluation. You want to make sure that your anxiety or your stress is not making you sick, right? So you want to rule out things like heart disease and, cardiovascular disorders and other things that would cause anxiety from a disease standpoint. You want to make sure that you don't have a life-threatening condition doing that, right? But once that's evaluated and you know that you're not dealing with something quite that extreme, rather than taking anxiety pills or antidepressants, if it's not an extreme condition, we have to then learn to soothe ourselves, right? Because medication is not really going to soothe us, it's going to numb us. And so we don't want to be numbed, we want to be fully alive, but have resiliency against stress, as opposed to being numbed out and still not really having resiliency to stress, right? The lack of resiliency to stress makes us sick. So whether you're on an antidepressant or an anxiety medication that makes you feel better, you're still at risk for disease because the root has not been, addressed. So the most important thing is how you breathe. Like, it's literally the most important thing. There's a lot of consideration that your thoughts are how you communicate with yourself. And while that is true, ultimately, I believe it will be shown that ultimately we communicate with ourselves through our breath. The way that we breathe is more innate than the way that we think. Thoughts are produced by, the brain, whereas our breath is very innate. If we perceive a threat, we will gulp, a breath of air, and that will trigger a fight or flight response, instantaneously. And so the breath is really one of the most fundamental things that we do that determine where we go when we get to the fork in the road. So every moment of your life is actually a fork in a road, and you have a choice to make. So you're either choosing to be calm or choosing to panic. We don't perceive it that way because we don't actually panic unless it's a real threat. But subconscious stress is actually a panic that we don't feel. And so that's why it's so dangerous. It's still a panic inside your body, but your brain has talked you down into thinking it's not a panic situation, because ultimately it's not. But your cells don't know that. Your cells always are at a fork in a road where they're either calm or panicked. They're either in fight or flight, or they're not in fight or flight. There's no such thing in your cells as kind of, sort of in fight or flight. That's like trying to be a little pregnant. It's not possible. You're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. There's no, spectrum in between. So your cells are either panicked or they're calm. There's nothing in between to your cells. To your brain, you have a whole spectrum. You're going to start talking yourself down from panicking, and then you will habituate to that. And so, your finances won't freak you out as much after a while. That relationship won't freak you out as much after a while because you actually get used to it. And so that's not healthy either, right? You don't want your brain to be intervening. You want to simply not be panicked, right? And so your perception of what's happening is so important, right? We tend to really put a lot of emphasis on material things because that's what's in our face, right? Everywhere we look, we perceive materiality, right? Because our senses are designed to perceive material things. But as we delve more and more into the science and the mathematics, we're beginning to see that material things aren't what we think they are, right? Material things kind of aren't really there. The more sophisticated the equipment becomes that we start looking at smaller and smaller things that we think are material, we begin to realize that they're mostly just space. We're 99% water by molecule, 70% water by weight. But if we look at the molecular structure of the human body, it's 99% water molecules. And what's in a water molecule, right? H2O. There's a lot of space between the H's and the O. And so a lot of us is just simply space. And what makes us who we are, and not, say, a jellyfish, which is also 99% water by molecule, is our spirit, right? Our soul. And our makeup is really more spiritual than material. And so, but if we focus on the material, we start laser beaming down into something that's very small, and it becomes big because that's all we're looking at. When we pan out and we look with more of a bird's eye view, we begin to see that there's so much more than just the material things that we see. And the broader we can bring out our view, the less impactful those material things seem to be. And then we start to realize that, hey, maybe that thing wasn't as important as I thought it was. When I really decided I was going to really dive deep into spirituality and look at really what is going on, what is the truth? I was very much into material things, right? Because that's what I grew up with. You become a physician, and being a medical doctor is all about the material body and fixing what's broken, and chemistry, and physical things. And so you think that's all that's there. And then once you start to look more in a spiritual way, you realize that what you thought was there is such a small part of what's actually there. And the only reason you think it's big is because your senses are designed to see the material thing. But once you start looking with other instruments, that sense energy and not so much just physical structures, you begin to see that the energy is so much bigger than the physical thing. And then once you can start to shift your focus away from the material thing more into the energetic thing, the material thing becomes smaller and smaller and less significant. Not that it's not important, right? We all need to eat. We all need to take care of our physical bodies. We need to sleep. We need to do all those things. But when we add to that all the other stressors that we voluntarily bring into our lives, we tend to make our lives a lot more difficult than they need to be. And so looking at things from a higher perspective, and when you do breath work and meditation, you kind of start to look at things from a more energetic or spiritual perspective, and then the material stuff starts to get less and less, scary, I guess we could say. We do have a couple questions. So let's see here. Was watching a reality show dealing with overweight individuals. During a scene where he visited a therapist, the therapist said that eating becomes a friend to someone suffering as a child. Without warning, I started crying. Seems there's something in my childhood that could be affecting me. Still, any suggestions to rid myself of this invisible stress? Yes, so they did a really monumental study in England years ago, and it was actually published in the, I think, American Journal of Cardiology as well. They looked at children, and I don't know how they did the study, but they did it. They had their teachers give them 140 question assessment of these children the teacher did with them at certain milestones in their lives during their school years. And then they tracked those students down, like, I don't know, when they reached, I think, the age of 45, if I remember this correctly. And they assessed those people who are now adults based on this 140 question questionnaire that the teacher filled out regarding these children when they were kids. It had to do with the amount of stress in their lives. And what the study showed was that as an adult, even if you no longer had the stress that you had in childhood, you still had the same risk of disease as though the stress had continued throughout your entire life. And that was a really important study, because even when they were taken out of the stressful circumstance of their childhood, they still dealt with the same issues that they would have had the stress stayed with them. And that was really monumental, because, again, that tells us that the brain doesn't forget anything. And, obviously some people need therapy, in order to really dig down into those issues. But what HeartMath has been shown to do is it allows the body to kind of get rid of the old, stale memories that no longer serve it. And when you flood the body with more positive energy, you start to displace the negative energy. So we become what we think, right? And that's also been kind of scientifically shown through a process called downward causation. We know that if we think something, chemicals are released down, through the brain signaling into the body. So our thoughts become chemistry and physiology and body function. So if we're thinking negative thoughts all the time, then we release a lot of cortisol and stress hormones. When we're thinking more positive thoughts, then we're releasing like oxytocin and dopamine. So there's a whole chemistry in your body when you think of negative thoughts that gets released versus when you think of positive thoughts. And so scientifically, we know that we actually become what we think. And so the breathing techniques and the meditation, HeartMath in particular, they ask you, as you're doing the breathing technique, to think of things that cause you to feel overwhelming joy. And it doesn't have to be anything real. It can be something you make up. I had one woman, she could not go into Coherence doing her HeartMath training until she imagined herself with one of the saints. I think she said, I can't remember if it was St. Peter or something like that. That was the only thing that brought her into Coherence. So that's what she would think about. I have some other clients, they have to be under the ocean swimming with dolphins, and then they go into Coherence, right? So it doesn't have to be an actual event that happens in your life. It can be anything. It can be fantastical. And so marrying the breath with the positive thought and having the feeling of the positive thought actually changes your brain. And it starts to release the chemistry that brings about healthier physiology and therefore improves health. So I believe it was Harvard who did the study on novice meditators. In other words, people who had never meditated before. They taught them to meditate for 20 minutes. And what they did before they taught them to meditate is they did what's called a functional MRI study. And they looked at the brain. And then they taught them how to meditate. And then they did another MRI, a functional MRI of their brain 2 months later. And they saw like actual structural changes in their brains. The structural changes were maintained if they kept meditating. If they stopped meditating, the structural changes reverted back to, the previous patterns that they had before they started meditating. So it's kind of like tending to a garden. Once you do these things, you have to keep doing them, because if you stop taking care of your garden, it doesn't matter if you took care of your garden for 365 days straight, right? If you walk away from your garden for a week and come back, you'll have weeds everywhere, right? So it's something that you have to consistently do. Now, does that mean if you stop doing it that, you can't ever go back because you just undid all the work you did before? No, but you do slip, and then you have to keep going. So the point isn't to be perfect. The point is, when you fall off the wagon, to get back on the wagon as soon as possible. And you continue to do these techniques. It's not, there was a book I read, it was a book on finances and marketing, but it said something about, people think things like meditation is something they do once and then they should be fixed forever. He said that's the equivalent of thinking you should just take one bath in your lifetime and that you should be able to stay clean for the rest of your life. He's like, it doesn't make sense. But for whatever reason, people tend to think, well, if I did this for so long, these effects should just last forever. And it's not true, right? You can take a bath every single day, right? And then choose not to take a bath for a week and see how many of your friends want to hang out with you, right? You go back to as though you'd never showered in your life. It's the same thing here. You have to keep doing it. Once you commit to that, you will release the energy. So when you started to cry, you brought that memory back, whether you were aware of it or not. So you may not have the conscious memory of a childhood trauma, but it still came to the surface, and the crying actually let it go. But there are many other memories, right? So when you do the breathing and the meditation, you keep bringing these things up to be released. And then there's a critical point at which you've released, this critical number of these thoughts, and you've replaced them with positive thoughts. It doesn't have to be a majority of positive thoughts. It just has to be a critical few. And then suddenly those positive thoughts start to spread, right? It's like you don't have to shove the darkness out of a room. You just have to turn the light on. Right? We don't have to find every crack and crevice of darkness and shove it out of the room to make the room light up. You just turn on the light switch. It's the same here. You just have to find something that brings you joy. Think about it. Do the breathing for 3 minutes, 3 times a day. There's a 6-hour lingering effect to HeartMath. So you do it for 3 minutes, and that energy kind of stays with you for 6 hours. So if you do it 3 times a day, and you really commit to doing it 3 times a day, once you kind of reach that critical point where you've been doing it consistently enough, you're flooding the body with positive energy and positive thoughts, you start to crowd out the negative ones, because there's only, your brain is going to want to go to what's fresh. So if what's fresh are all the positive thoughts that you keep bringing in, it will keep recalling those positive things to frame your life, if that makes sense, right? Your brain just goes back and looks at, what does that remind me of? What does that remind me of? Every time it has an experience, it goes back into its memory and it asks itself, what does this experience I just had remind me of? And that's how it frames it. So if you're starting to have more positive associations in your life, it will go back to the positive thoughts and reframe that as what it just experienced. And so the positive thoughts start feeding on themselves instead of the negative thoughts, feeding on themselves. So I hope that answered your question.
I got Dr. Riobe went past break.
Oh, okay. Let's go to a break. Perfect. And then we'll come back and address these other questions. We're here live on Dream Vision 7 Radio. I'm Dr. Mylaine Riobe, and you're listening to Awaken Wellness Now, and we will be right back.
What happens when we begin to realize that the 200-year experiment we've called the American healthcare system has failed? Learn how spirituality, ancient traditions, and cutting-edge science are merging to create a new paradigm of wellness on Awakened Wellness with Mylaine Riobe, MD. Tune in every Wednesday at 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Time with live video shows every first and third Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, when you can call in and ask Dr. Mylaine the questions that matter most to you. Dr. Mylaine is the medical director of the Riobe Institute of Integrative Medicine in Jupiter, Florida. For more information, visit RIOBE-integrativemedicine.com. Dream Vision 7 Radio Network invites you in for this dynamic, forward-thinking show.
Join Dr. Bernie Siegel on Mind Health Matters every Thursday and Friday, 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Time on syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. Bernie will draw from his inspirational personal journey, offering us special nuggets of his sacred wisdom weaved through his delightful stories. Listen in as Bernie reminds us to be fully engaged in life.
Ever wonder what it's like to have your own radio show? Well, wonder no longer, because you can dip into the radio airwaves by being host for the day on syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. It's a fabulous way to get your radio feet wet. It's an opportunity to market your business, modality, or book. Have a guest, mention a sponsor, and take callers. Or you may want to facilitate a lesson by going solo. It's up to you. Listeners can be online, mobile, in cars with Bluetooth, or listen through Amazon's Echo by asking, Alexa, play Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. For more details, go to dreamvision7radio.com and click on Host for the Day.
Looking for a fun and relaxing getaway? Omega Rest and Rejuvenation Retreats are a great way to unwind and renew your spirit. Sit and read in the garden, explore the woodland trails, or try a daily yoga or meditation class. You can stretch your body, quiet your mind, and do as much or as little as you choose. Located in Rhinebeck, New York, just 90 miles north of New York City, Omega's natural environment and quiet pace allow for extraordinary experiences to unfold. Learn more at eomega.org.
Delight your kids with an enchanting journey by reading the Paper Doll Kids children's book by Deborah Beauvais and Janine Sullivan. There's even a catchy tune, Kids for Love Song, produced by Bob Sherwood and sung by kids just like yours. The story weaves around 7 paper dolls flying around the world doing good deeds as they bring important attention to our endangered animal friends. There's even a magical ring with a universal message. Kids become interested in service projects, action through compassion, and planting seeds that nurture positive change. The Paper Doll Kids and Kids for Love Song are a production of the Kids for Love Project. Get the book now on Amazon Kindle and the song on CD Baby or iTunes.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
And we're back. I hated to interrupt. It's such an interesting topic, but
You have to interrupt me, so I'm happy you do. Otherwise, I'll keep going. All right, so we had a few other really good questions. Can my swinging blood sugar cause stress to my body? If so, can I stop it? So it's probably the other way around, right? It's the stress that's causing your blood sugar to swing up and down. It's not your blood sugar causing stress. So the fight or flight response causes the blood sugar to go up because you need sugar to fuel fighting or running, right? So the first response in a fight or flight response is to raise blood sugar so that that sugar can distribute itself to your muscles so you can run from a predator or fight. And so when you're under stress, your liver releases sugar into the bloodstream. In Chinese medicine, it is understood that your liver is actually your stress organ. They don't say that the adrenals are the stress organ like we do in mainstream medicine. The reason for that is they say that the liver controls your circulation. So the adrenals might make your cortisol, but your liver controls how much cortisol gets released into your bloodstream. And the liver also controls how much sugar gets released into your bloodstream. And so blood sugar fluctuations are more of a result of stress than that they cause stress. So I hope that makes sense. So again, reducing your stress may reduce your blood sugar levels. It's not usually that simple, but that's one step. So there may be other things. So you have to look at the liver in general and say, well, is there an overload of toxins in the liver? And the liver is not able to remove toxins. If that's the case, it will not be able to properly control blood sugar. If there's too much inflammation in the body, it will not be able to control blood sugar. We often think, well, blood sugar is an insulin thing, and we talk about insulin resistance and those types of things. And that is a factor, but the liver is a very important factor with blood sugar. And so you have to look at, do you have a lot of inflammation? Is the liver struggling to remove toxins in the body? And if so, it's going to have difficulty regulating your blood sugar as well. Heavy metals, or perhaps genetic predispositions that make it harder for the liver to manage blood sugar. But it's kind of the other way around. It's the stress that makes the blood sugar go up. And of course, it's also a vicious circle, because if you have too much sugar in your bloodstream, that damages your cells. It damages your blood vessels, because sugar is toxic and your body knows it's toxic. So that's why your body goes to extremes to get sugar out of the bloodstream and drive it into your cells so that your cells can use it for energy. But if your cells are damaged from heavy metals or toxins, it's harder to drive the sugar into the cells, and it floats around in the bloodstream. And that's what we call diabetes. So I hope that answers your question, but it becomes this vicious circle, catch-22. You can start to break the circle with stress management techniques, and then look into other causes of why the liver might not be, working properly, that may cause your blood sugar to be elevated. And again, you won't find it in your blood work, right? Your liver function tests will likely be normal, despite the liver not working well. So in that case, a doctor of Oriental medicine may come in, to be more useful than regular medicine or mainstream medicine, because a doctor of Oriental medicine or someone who has studied Chinese medicine and acupuncture can diagnose a liver issue without testing. So that's a great question. Thank you for that one. Question: my old man causes me stress. Can you tell me how to tune him out of my eternal stress? Wow. I don't think you would like my answer, but I can tell you, but well, that's where critical conversations come in, right? It's first of all, we have to get ourselves correct, if you will. We have to bring peace to ourselves, or we will not see it reflected in the outer world, right? So when someone is causing you stress, it's actually you causing yourself stress, if that makes sense. If we really look at what's happening, is because there's inner conflict, there's outer conflict. So you will attract to yourself someone who brings conflict if you have it on the inside. And so the first thing to do to resolve stress is always to work on yourself, ultimately. And then what happens there is, because there's an entrainment of energy, you're always exchanging energy with other people. Whether we know it or not, it's constantly happening. You've heard it said that when a certain person walks into a room, the whole room changes, right? It's because of that person's energy and the entrainment, the sharing of energy with other people. And so people that vibrate at a very high energy state, when they walk in to a room with a lower energy state, their higher energy state will dominate. Just like if you turn on a light switch. If you turn on a light switch, the darkness can't dominate over a higher energy light source. It's the same thing with us. It's not quite that dramatic as turning on a light switch. But it's always about, how do I work on me so that the vibe I'm sending out doesn't bring back conflict, because there's no conflict being sent out. So I hope that answers your question. But It's always about self-reflection, right? What is it about myself? What is it that I believe about myself that is leading to this interaction that is unpleasant to me, that I'm perceiving as unpleasant? And so it always means there's something within myself that I'm perceiving about myself to be unpleasant. And so we have to kind of look at that. And then we have to kind of start to look at ourselves as little kids. They talk a lot about inner child work and things like that. When a little kid does something, we don't berate that kid. We don't yell and scream. We always try and comfort, the child and let them know that it's not their fault, and then help them to learn from what they did so that they don't repeat, the same thing, right? And we have to start to look at ourselves in that light as little kids, right? So technically we were put on this harsh planet with no real training, nobody gave us the manual. You can't Google the manual. And so we're like little kids trying to figure out how to get along on the planet. And so we have to not be hard on ourselves if we want to get along on this planet, right? We have to almost look at ourselves as little kids. So you almost have to adult yourself and start to really kind of forgive old patterns and forgive old experiences. Not so much that we allow people that hurt us or that are unsafe for us to be around us, not that type of forgiveness, but it's more like the understanding that maybe we just don't know any better, because there's no manual, and we get trained by, our elders and people in positions of authority who think they're doing things in our best interest, but maybe are not, right? So most of the time, what we learn as we get older is that we were taught to be afraid of everything. Everything we learned was revolving around fear. And as we get older, we start to realize that a lot of that fear was unfounded, but we didn't know at the time, right? So we have to kind of forgive the past because we didn't know at the time. We didn't know any better. Had we known, we would have done things differently. And so we have to approach ourselves in that way. Like, I may know better today, but 10 years ago, I didn't. And so I can't blame my 10 years ago self for what she did, because she did what she did based on what she knew at the time, right? So we can't turn around and look in the past and judge ourselves. We have to kind of forgive it and say, had I known then what I know today, I probably wouldn't have done that thing, but I didn't. So I need to just kind of let that go. And now I need to carry the lesson forward with me. And so that's what I mean by forgiveness. And so once we start to do that work in combination with the breathing, in combination with the meditation, and perhaps even in combination with a therapist, right, we start to release that old patterned thinking, and we start to fill in those gaps with positivity. And then all of a sudden, like, people change, right? People start to behave differently because now you're not tolerating the same things, right? People treat us the way we train them to treat us. And so if we change our boundaries, because we think differently and we know ourselves to be different, they have to interact with us differently, because we're putting this energy or this boundary or whatever you want to call it out there now, because it's emanating from within ourselves. And so they have to respond to us differently. So I hope that answered your question. Let's see, make sure. We should probably go to another commercial, right, Rachel?
Exactly. I was going to say something, but.
Okay, so you're listening to us here live on Dream Vision 7 Radio. I'm Dr. Mylaine Riobe. We're going to take a commercial break and get to the next few questions we have here. Thank you.
What happens when we begin to realize that the 200-year experiment we've called the American healthcare system has failed? Learn how spirituality, ancient traditions, and cutting-edge science are merging to create a new paradigm of wellness on Awakened Wellness with Mylaine Riobe, MD. Tune in every Wednesday at 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Time with live video shows every first and third Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, when you can call in and ask Dr. Mylaine the questions that matter most to you. Dr. Mylaine is the medical director of the Riobe Institute of Integrative Medicine in Jupiter, Florida. For more information, visit RIOBE Dream Vision 7 Radio Network invites you in for this dynamic, forward-thinking show.
EDECIA is a U.S. nonprofit dedicated to the dream of ending childhood malnutrition for millions of children around the world through the manufacture of Plumpy Nut and other nutrient-rich, peanut-based, ready-to-use foods. EDECIA has already delivered life and hope to nearly 1 million children in over 26 developing countries. To find out how you can join EDECIA's dream of ending childhood malnutrition, please visit edeciaglobal.org.
What if dreams can diagnose your life? What if we can meet the love of our life in dreams? Join host Kat O'Keefe Canavas, the #1 internationally best-selling author of Dreams That Can Save Your Life, written with Duke University medical doctor Larry Burke. Dreaming Healing is where we'll explore dreams, research, and interpret dreams from you, the caller. Dreaming Healing shows can be heard every Tuesday at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern, with live shows on the first and third evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific Time on syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. Come live your dreams out loud with Kat.
Are you searching for a way to help create global change? Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's vision is to have an eclectic group of radio hosts dedicated to educating, enlightening, and helping humankind with positive messages and tools that enhance lives using different modalities and programs. If you would like to join our team and help illuminate the universe, call Deborah at 508-226-1723 or Deborah at dreamvision7radio.com.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
And we're back.
Thank you, Rachel. All right, welcome back to Awaken Wellness. I'm your host, Dr. Mylaine Riobe. I am the medical director of the Riobe Institute of Integrative Medicine here in Jupiter, Florida. And as always, I'm loving these questions. So here's another one. Read something online about astronauts' brains changed when exposed to space. So wouldn't astral travel change my brain a bit also? So it turns out you don't actually have to go anywhere. You can do it right here. But that's what meditation does. It changes your brain waves, if you will. Astronauts often talk about, and I didn't see this report, but some of the astronauts that I've seen interviewed say that their perspective of life just literally changes when they see the planet from outer space. Their perspective or their perception shifts. And then suddenly it just becomes, they kind of fall in love with the planet a little bit more, right? When you're in the belly of the beast, it's kind of hard to see what's going on. But when you take that bird's eye view, like when you have the privilege of going out into outer space and then looking back at the blue marble, as they describe it, there's something really magic about that, or spiritual, if you will. And suddenly problems seem to get smaller and smaller, right? Again, as you pan out, things that you think are huge become smaller and smaller, and they even disappear from view, right? The idea that the earth was flat was based on the idea that when you're standing on the earth and you look at the horizon, it does look flat, and so, all of Europe thought the earth was flat, and, North America, when they migrated over, they all thought the earth was flat. But it wasn't. It's always been round. It's never been flat. Ancient civilizations understood the earth was round, right? They based the pyramids on that. They based, their farming on that. They based a lot of ancient structures knowing that the earth is round. But when you're on the earth, if you're looking out at the horizon, it does look flat. It's only as you pan out that you start to see, wait, there's a curve about the earth. And if you go into outer space, it becomes, clear that it's a ball, right? And that it is round. And so it's about your perception and your perspective. Everything is, so when we're looking at something, our five senses give us a certain perception about those things. This is hot, this is cold, this is good, this is bad. All those things are brought about by our senses and the perception that we develop in the brain as our brain looks at what does this mean and what does that mean, and it goes back into its memory bank to piece together, the story of what it sees, what the signal the eyes send to it, the signal that your hands and your skin sends to it when you touch something, the signal that your ear sends when you hear something, or your nose sends, or your mouth sends when you smell or taste something. Your brain is processing all that data and creating a story. The thing about the brain that's important to know is that it's always in the past. It's impossible for your brain to be in the present. So when they say to be in the present moment, you actually can't involve your brain in that activity because it's not capable of doing that. The only time it appears to be capable of doing that is when it's the heart that is actually commanding it. Then it's in the present, right? But I use this example all the time. If you're sitting at a traffic light, you actually don't know when the light turns green as it's turning green, because you have to wait until the signal, the light from the traffic light, the green light, the wave has to come into your eye. Then your eye has to send a signal to your brain, and your brain has to recognize that that's a red light that just turned green. And then your brain has to then process that you can put your foot on the accelerator, and then you go. And my son was like, yeah, that's reaction time. I was like, well, it's kind of reaction time, but you don't even know it happened until until after it happened. And so your brain is never in the present. It's not possible. If you touch something, for you to know that it's cold or hot, that signal has to go from your hand to your brain, and then your brain has to process that data and figure out that it's something hot or cold. It happens so fast that we think it's instantaneous, but it's not. You have to wait for that signal to travel. And so your brain is never quite in the present, but your heart is. And I'm not talking about the physical heart. I'm talking about the energy field of the heart. So HeartMath helps to bring the brain more in alignment so that it's not constantly fearing the past. Your brain is a survival tool. So without the human brain, we would have gone extinct, like millions of years ago. It is the brain that allows us to fear things so that we can survive, right? So we fear fire. We fear jumping off cliffs. We fear predators. And that's a built-in survival mechanism that is essential for us to be able to stay alive on the planet. But when we get stuck there, that's where the stress comes in. That's where the panic and the anxiety and the depression and eventually diseases come in, is when we get stuck there. So we have to realize that, okay, it's not just about my brain, it's actually about my spirit as well. And many ancient traditions tell us that the spirit or the soul is housed in the heart. In Chinese medicine, they say the mind is housed in the heart. And they say the mind is not in your head. The mind is everywhere, is what they say in Chinese medicine. Your brain is in your head, but your mind is everywhere. And your mind is what they say housed in the heart. So it's almost like a portal. It comes through in the heart. And so that is always in the present. And they've done some studies now on that to show that, there's some good evidence suggesting that that is true. People who are very good at meditation or are in what they call high coherence are able to predict things before they happen by up to 6 seconds. And Princeton University did an incredible study. It's still going on. What they did was they put random number generators in multiple labs throughout the world. And a random number generator just produces either, let's say, for example, a 1 or a 0. So it's like flipping a coin. You either get heads or you get tails. And they put these generators all over the world in various labs. Nobody interacted with them. They were just in a room by themselves, isolated. And then whether or not it was a 0 or a 1 or a heads or a tails, if you will, that data was sent to Princeton University, and they had the supercomputer that analyzed the data. So we know, based on averages, if you flip a coin enough times, you're going to get roughly 50% heads, 50% tails. What they started to realize at Princeton was there were days or times when the numbers were very not random. They were either all heads, like way more than normal, or all tails, way more than normal. And they started to see that these things correlated with world events, elections, natural disasters. Suddenly, the numbers became very non-random. The most monumental change in the most significant non-random day was September 11th of 2001. And I think to this day, they have not had an event that created such a non-random pattern in their data. And they're still doing this study, 20 years, well over 20 years since September 11th, they're still doing this study. And what they noted on September 11th is a huge non-random spike. And what was incredible is the time at which the non-random spike occurred. The first plane hit the World Trade Center at 8:30 in the morning, roughly Eastern Standard Time. The non-random event on Princeton's data started at 4:30 in the morning. So it happened 4 hours before the first plane hit the tower. So there is something that is outside of space and time, if you will, that is not dependent on time. There is a level of collective consciousness, if you will, that is out there. We're starting to really see that. And so the heart is in tune with that. And that's why HeartMath and breathing and meditation is so, so critical. Let's see. I think we have one more minute or two, Rachel. Do we have time for one more?
I'm not sure. You got about 2 more minutes. And I saw the list of questions. They're pretty involved.
Okay. Let's see if there's anything I can do real quick. Would love a show on HeartMath. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is practically a show on HeartMath, but we'll do the breathing technique maybe next time. But just for, a couple minutes, what else can you do to stress-proof yourself? Of course, we always talk about proper sleep, right? Getting enough sleep is critical. And then making sure you get that sleep at the right time is also critical. So we talked a little bit about that golden hour between 10 and 11 p.m. as a critical time to really wind down and be in bed, because your body starts to really prepare itself for restoration. So you detox at night, you grow muscles, you restore yourself. Everything gets done at night. The shelves get restocked at night. If you're not in bed at the right time and for enough time, you don't restock the shelves, and obviously run out of supply, right? And that creates a lot of stress on your body if you don't sleep enough and sleep at the proper time. So getting into bed by about 10 p.m. So that you're asleep by 11, and making sure that you get a good 8, maybe 9 hours of sleep if you're really tired all the time is essential. So we could go on and on about stress proof, but I hope that today's show is at least a really good grounding starting point for you. As always, I love the questions, and I thank you so much for joining me here on Awaken Wellness. I am your host, Dr. Mylaine Riobe, And until next time, I send you many blessings. Thank you.
Join us next time on Awakened Wellness with Mylaine Riobe, MD, to learn how spirituality, ancient traditions, and cutting-edge science are merging to create a new paradigm of wellness. Awakened Wellness airs every Wednesday at 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Time, with live video shows every first and third Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern of each month. Meanwhile, you can join our Facebook page at facebook.com/awakenedwellness and let us know what you'd like to discuss on future episodes. Dr. Mylaine is the medical director of the Riobe Institute of Integrative Medicine in Jupiter, Florida. For more information, visit riobeintegrativemedicine.com. This show is part of the Dream Vision 7 radio network.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy.